In 1972, when I graduated from college, I didn't head back to Ithaca, New York, my hometown. I'd been given the name and address of a communal sort of farm in Wisconsin, not far from Menominee, Wisconsin. I didn't know any of the people there, but this guy at college who had given me this address and phone number was a brother of two of the people who were living on the farm. And so I had his name to refer to. When I got as near as I could to the farm, hitchhiking on Interstate 94 between Madison and the Twin Cities, I found a payphone and I called the farm, and Dottie Bacon picked me up and drove me back to the farm. Bubbling Springs Farm. We arrived there. I was introduced to the various people working there, living there that summer. There might have been 10 people at supper time when I arrived. One of them was a guy named Mike Frame. And when I told them my name, Mike Frame, who must have been in his 30s at the time, he said to me, "Are you any relation to Arthur T. Mosher?" And I said, "Well, yeah, he's my father." And Mike said, "I met your father once when I was in the Peace Corps in Nepal, under kind of unusual circumstances. I was posted at the farthest location from a road of anyone in any Peace Corps location in the world at that point. I was a 2-day hike from the nearest real road that you could get to by car. There were trails where I was leading to the villages you could get to by donkey and various conveyances, but not by car. And so this rendezvous with your father had been set up several weeks in advance. I walked a full day or two, I forget how long it was, and I was to meet them in a meadow, as flat a meadow as could be found in that part of Nepal, out in these mountainous valleys. And they came in, this one Ford Foundation guy and your father, in a small plane and landed in the meadow. I got to talk with your father about various rural development questions I had for a couple of hours. And then it was about to get dark and the plane had to head back to Kathmandu. And so they took off, the pilot and these two men. And I turned around and I headed back toward my village. When I asked Mike how he'd come to know about Dad, he said, "Well, A.T. Mosher is famous in the world of agricultural development, all over the world among people who can read." It was some of his early writings I had read when I went out to Nepal in the Peace Corps. And then later on when I was there, I'd done 2 tours in the Peace Corps, and then I was there working for AID. That was when I think I read Getting Agriculture Moving. And that really spoke to me. That was really something. Now, he'd taken some heat from his peers for that book. In it, he boiled down all his experience for many years in agricultural development thinking and couched it in plain language. His idea was to write a handbook for farmers who could read in whatever their own language happened to be. So he wrote it in English, but he didn't write it in the kind of academically approved jargon that his colleagues expected from him. He got done writing it, he sent it out for peer review from his colleagues, and was stunned to hear that what they really disliked about it was that the language wasn't fancy enough. It was written in too plain an English. But that was the point. He wanted it to be in plain language. So he didn't pay any attention to that criticism. And Much to their chagrin, these other people in his field, and to his satisfaction, I think, although he didn't say so, it became rather a bestseller in the international economic development world. Or would have been a bestseller if he'd sold it, but he wanted to give the copies away. Among other things, it was used as a Peace Corps training book, which is why Mike Frame knew about it. I told Dad years later. He remembered their meeting. I told another man who worked with Dad, Milt Barnett. I told him this story. Milt Barnett was an anthropologist who had taught, I think, at Wisconsin and Madison, and he might have taught at Cornell as well. He'd been at both places. He was quite a guy, Milt Barnett. Quite a joker in some ways. He had told me, for example, about the time he had met Ernest Hemingway in Paris. I said, "Oh, really? You seem a little young to have known Hemingway in Paris." And Milt said, "No, I met him. He had a big square face, Milt. His head kind of sank into his shoulders, a twinkle in his eye, puff on his pipe." He said, "No, I met Ernest Hemingway at the Ritz in Paris." So I let that pass. Later on, I said to Dad, "I gather Milt is friends with Ernest Hemingway. He seems to have met him in Paris." Dad said, "Milt said that, did he?" That's all Dad said. He didn't say, "Milt Barnett is a prodigious liar. Don't trust the word he says. He's always pulling someone's leg." He said, "Oh, Milt said that, did he?" in such a way that I could tell that he was skeptical. The time I told Milt about this Mike Frame discussion of Dad's reputation at the Bubbling Springs farm in Wisconsin, he said, "Well, I've got an anecdote that's somewhat similar to that, just about as dramatic as that one, but in different circumstances. One time, I was with a guide in Malaysia, and we had been walking through the back brush and jungle and the rubber plantations and the heavy undergrowth. This man was guiding me along. He spoke Malay, I didn't. I said, "I thought you spoke all languages, Milt." He said, "No, I don't speak Malay. I speak Cantonese all right. I speak Mandarin, but not Malay." So we'd been walking through this jungle for a while, and we came to a clearing. We knew we were near a village, and we kept following the trail until we came into this village. And as many villages in Malaysia, it was a collection of mud huts with the kind of thatch for their roofs. Quite primitive homes, but one hut was considerably bigger than the others, and it had smoothed down sides, and you could tell that that was the chief's hut because it was bigger and it had a prominent position in the village. When we came around the side of this hut, we saw that one side had been all smoothed down, all flattened down, and there was writing on the side, kind of engraved in the mud, in the fresh mud when they had made the hut. They had pressed with a finger the lettering on the side of this hut. It was written in Malay, and there were a number of what seemed to be slogans. I asked my guide to interpret that for me, and he said, "These 5 sayings are the agricultural wisdom of Dr. Arthur T. Mosier." And so they had quoted 5 lines out of Dad's book, Getting Agriculture Moving, on the wall of this hut in a remote spot in Malaysia, clearing in the jungle. I told Dad about that too later. And Dad said, "Yeah, Milt told me about that." I wonder. Milt says all sorts of things.